In this part of our tutorial, we'll introduce the second of two ways to test two conditions at once, but we'll be using Android instead of iOS. So we're going to do that by testing if two conditions are true, and if both are true, if both tests pass, then we change a value of a variable, very similar to what we did before. But we'll be using nested if statements instead of testing both conditions in one set of brackets. So we'll do this by taking a look at the isLoggedIn example again, where we have an account, an isLoggedIn variable, and a username and password. So we just finished looking at the first way to test two conditions with one if statement. Now we're going to look at the second way, but we'll be using Android instead. So let's keep the same example as we had before, where we had the account with an isLoggedIn variable, and it had a username and a password as well. So let's set that up. So we have username, and we're going to set this to Mammoth, and we have a password which we'll set to interactive. Okay, cool. So here's our account setup. Again, if we were testing before to see if both the username and the password matched, then we change the isLoggedIn variable to true, and we'd theoretically be able to access our account. Now that was using the way where we test two if statements in two conditions in one if statement. Now we're going to take a look at something a little different. It's what we call a nested if statement. So this is going to be an if statement within another if statement. So this is what it looks like here. So we have if one condition, and then if that's true, then we test the second condition, and then we have some kind of code to execute. So the first condition is we want to test perhaps if username matches. So remember the double equals when we're testing things here. And we want to say if username matches Mammoth. Cool, so if it does, then that will pass, and we'll execute this, which will be testing the next condition. That will be if password equals interactive. Okay, and if that's true as well, then we can change the text to be the isLoggedIn variable changed to a string. Yeah. Okay, so this is doing that. Before we had this kind of a setup where we had the if, and then if condition 1 and condition 2 are both true, then we would execute the code. However, this time we're testing one condition at a time. So first we'll test the username. If that matches, then we'll test the password, and if that matches as well, then we'll get this printed out. And let's go ahead and run that just to show you that it works pretty much exactly the same way. So again, test this one, that's true, test that one, if that's true, then we change this one. Oh, well, right now we're just printing it out, so I guess we should first test this, or change the isLoggedIn to true, so let's change this one to true. Okay. And let's stop that and rerun it, because before we hadn't changed the value of it, we're just printing it out. So now we're actually changing the value and printing it, and there we go, we get true. And that's because both of these cases are true, so both match. Now let's take a look at what happens if either one of these is false. So in this case we can't test the OR condition, we can only test the AND condition. So keep that in mind, it's a little limited that way. So let's say again this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's stop it and rerun it. And we could have put this outside of the if statements if we want, it doesn't really matter. And there we go, we get the isLoggedIn variable not being printed out or changed because we failed one of these conditions here. If we really want, we could do what I was just talking about and take that out. So I'm just going to cut it, paste it down here, and we'll rerun it. And this time it should display our is logged in, except it will be false this time. There we go. So again, because one of these conditions or both of them failed, then we cannot execute this code. So just to recap, this setup will first test this condition. If that's true, then it will test this condition, and if that's true, then it will execute the code. If one of these conditions or both of them are false, none of this code in the middle gets executed, and the isLoggedIn variable is still false, meaning we're not logged in. So this has been the second way to test two conditions at once. It's a little different from the first, and again, both have their values and the times when you'd use one over the other. In this part of our tutorial, we introduce the second of two ways to test two conditions at once in Android. So we did this by testing to see if a username and password match and looking at the example of an account, and if they do, then we change the isLoggedIn variable to true. So by now you should be able to understand and use nested if statements and to determine when to use them over testing two conditions with one if statement, namely the fact that we don't have the OR operator if we use two if statements.